Want to see a rare sight?
Two brothers are going to agree.
Here's 10 books we both love.
Readers,
reviewers,
countrymen,
lend us your ears.
Thank you to all of our bindery members.
Thank you to the Pit Fighters, the First Swords, and all of the Bright Stars.
Truth and courage.
There's books like The Blade Itself,
The Winter King,
The Daughter's War,
Glorious Exploits,
The Wolf Den,
and of course, Papa John Gwyn.
They are books that we always talk about on the channel time and time and time again. And you probably get a little bit bored because you're like, I get it. They love those books. So here are 10 different books, some that we probably also talk about a lot, but 10 different books we always love and that we love to talk about to each other. So we're going to be agreeing today, Ed, a rare sight indeed. And it's 10 books we both love, clues in the title, but not just the ones we always mention. So Ed, let's get into it. What's the first book we both love we're talking about today?
Getting down to business is Dreaming the Eagle by Amanda Scott. Now this is the Boudica series. Will actually hasn't finished the series yet, but we both will admit that book one is an absolute masterpiece of the genre.
I will admit that. If you push me to it, I will admit it. But yeah, Dreaming the Eagle, it is basically the perfect historical fiction series for fancy readers, as said by Papa Gwyn himself. And I mean, if you don't trust us, trust him for sure. And then, if you don't like it, I'll say it's Papa Gwyn's fault. This is the most epic historical fiction series you will find. It's also character driven. You've got this coming of age element to it. The perfect balance between immersion but also storytelling, where you're not getting info dumped with the history. The culture is brilliantly explored. There's animal companions, epic action sequences, and far, far more.
I couldn't have summed it up better myself.
Next up is some Greek myth. We have got The Silence of the Girls, our favourite Greek retelling, and possibly my favourite kind of mythological retelling, joint with the Warlord Chronicles, really, in terms of quality.
Are we going to go through them all?
I'm joking, yeah. So The Silence of the Girls, Pat Barker, this is part of a trilogy, but you can just talk about it as one. Really, I'd read it as a duology. I didn't love book 3 as much. But The Silence of the Girls is book 1. It is about Briseis, who is a slave to Achilles and Agamemnon and so many other key players of the Iliad. And so she really sees their story from a very different perspective, but she is privy to conversations and much more which are really integral to the story of the Iliad, but through her perspective it is very, very different in how it's received, and also our own reactions to the heroism of certain characters.
It's really nice of you to let me talk, Will.
Sorry.
It's great.
I get passionate.
I do love talking in our videos. This book, Pat Barker in general, probably to me has my favourite prose of all time. It's the perfect balance of informative, emotive, immersive, and with that artistic flair. And I would say that Pat Barker is an artist of her craft. The way that she crafts relationships, whether you've read the Iliad or not, whether you've read the Odyssey or not, there is something incredibly rich in these pages. And I particularly love the relationships portrayed here. They leave a really lasting impression on you.
When I think of prose, there's 4 authors I think about. Robin Hobb, I think about Christopher Buehlman, I think about Pat Barker, and I think about Amanda Scott.
Very nice, well, good list.
We've talked about some, more modern releases. How about we go back in time a bit?
Yeah, let's rewind. We have David Gemmell's The Sword in the Storm. Now, this is classic fantasy at its absolute best, but mix in a kind of modern perspective of morally grey realism. We have the character of Conover as a young warrior in the Regante tribe, and he is kind of making a name for himself. Everyone else, who knows him, comes into contact with him, knows that he is someone to keep an eye on, maybe even 2 eyes. And he makes friends, makes enemies, has lovers, has rivals, and then their lands are invaded by the Stone Peoples, very similar to the Roman invasion of Britain. Conover leaves and he sets out to try and right a few wrongs. And the journey that David Gemmell takes us on is so intense. It's so kind of widely scoped, but also strangely intimate. It's quite a big cast, especially as quite a few POVs. But it feels so intimate, like those characters incredibly well. Now, I would say that David Gemmell is at his best when he is writing the kind of the morally grey decisions that his main POVs makes, as well as combat. He is an amazing kind of, the fights, the action scenes have such vigour, have such an intensity, and I love David Gemmell's writing just so much.
Yeah, he's kind of that kind of era just before the grimdarkness settled into fantasy, where there is a lot of dark stuff. There's morally complex and also sometimes bad people or good people making bad decisions, but on the flip side of the coin you have got this hope, you've got this goodness inside of them, that even if they are doing bad things, they are striving to do good, and you can see that their redemption is possible. And so it's not too dark that it really takes you away from the characters. You're still meant to be rooting for them, and they're not anti-heroes, but they're not the classic fantasy hero either.
No, they're a great balance.
Next up, something very, very different, and a book that really stands on its own and can't really be compared to anything else that I've read anyway, is Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy.
What a book. This is actually one of the first books I ever read, which is pretty crazy, to be honest. It is...
Can I just make sure people know you didn't read this as a child?
No, as an adult.
Okay.
Yes. One of... I kind of
that would be very worrying.
Fell out of love of reading, and there's a few books, quite a few on this list, that kind of got me back into reading, and Blood Meridian was one of them. The way that Cormac McCarthy writes with it's like this kind of archaic biblical tone, but with such characterization of even the landscapes, down to dialogue that will push you to your wits' end. It's a real journey. It feels like the Western Odyssey, and it is so intense. Everything from the prose, everything's kind of attacking you, and it goes against your senses. But it's just an incredible read. I absolutely loved it. I ate it up. It's kind of a bitter taste in my mouth.
Yeah, it's one of those that you feel like, I'm not like, it feels wrong to say you're enjoying it, but you're definitely hooked. And I always think that the aim of a book is it has to entertain you. It has to, not necessarily an outright enjoyment. It has to hook you though, and have
it's compelling.
It has to be. Yeah, I mean, compelling a lot of the time, but I think entertainment is the core part of it. Whether that's because it's making you think in philosophical ways, whether that's just laughing a lot, whether that's being hooked into kind of unravelling a mystery. There's so many different avenues for that, and that's why kind of the rating system of 5 to 1 star is quite difficult as well, because there's different reasons you'll love a book. Blood Meridian falls into the one where it feels wrong to say you enjoyed it, but you mean it in the sense that you were enthralled by this read. And sometimes it's very hard to read. I have to reread passages, and I had a very different experience this second time round. I think the first time I did enjoy it, but I knew it was kind of a masterpiece, but I didn't really get a lot from it. Whereas on a reread, I was, I think, going in clear of what to expect, and also I'd read quite a lot more books, so I think I kind of understood a bit more about McCarthy's writing and how to get a better experience out of this. It's not for the faint of heart, and I wouldn't recommend it to a beginner reader, although it worked for you, Ed, so who am I to say?
But I'm a bit of a weirdo as well, and anything Western I will jump headfirst into. This is the story of the 1840s, the Mexican War of Independence, and there is a group of Americans who go into Mexico, and they're paid by the government to scalp Native Americans, and they get paid for each scalp they deliver. And the book is as harrowing as that plot sounds.
It's horrifying, yeah. And this is called Cormac McCarthy's magnum opus almost unanimously. Personally, I prefer some of his other works, but I do understand, because of the craft put into this, why it is put with that label. We love quite a few of Cormac McCarthy's books, both, but we decided to talk about Blood Meridian because we have talked about it on the channel before, and we saw there's some interest, and hopefully some more people pick it up, because I think it's one of those that even if you really don't love it, it really does show another side to literature and what literature can achieve in a very different direction.
Yeah.
There you go, that's Blood Meridian.
So the book to kind of kickstart me on my kind of reading journey, my new love of reading, was Patrick DeWitt's The Sisters Brothers, and I quickly recommended it to Will. And we both loved it, didn't we? It's about two brothers, one who's a bit older, he has a bit of a bad time, he's a bit snarky, a bit sarcastic, quite aggressive to his younger brother, and they didn't always get along. The other brother is, the younger brother is quite soft, quite has a lovely way about him. He's really kind, and it feels a bit on the nose.
Yeah. Well, Ed said to me, you should read this because it's basically us, and I was thinking there must be an insult in there, so I had to pick it up, and it was the first Western I ever read. There is a film of it, and after I read this book, Ed said, let's watch the film. We start watching, and the first few lines were in German, and you were like, I don't remember this scene in the book, and then we carry on. And Ed had put the German version on.
Yeah, needless to say, we don't speak German, unfortunately.
But the Sisters
Apart
Brothers...
from Scheiße. That's all I know.
That's all you know, the extent.
Yeah.
Well, your lessons at school, the teacher would be disappointed. Anyway, Sisters Brothers, it's very different from kind of the typical Western. it is a bit of a deconstruction of the American dream, the American West. You've got two brothers tasked with finding someone, and they're being paid to do so. And so along their travels, they do have some of the classic kind of cowboy western moments. There are some action sequences. There's a lot to do with the kind of like a gold chase and things like that, but it's done in a very subverted way, and it's much more about a deeper relationship between these two brothers and how they are so vastly different, but there's something magnetic about family, and they do have this deep love for each other, and it's fantastic. I also really enjoyed the film. I don't think the film was quite as good. Still very good, fantastic acting, and this book is one that it's quite strange. Over time, I like it even more than when I read it, where a lot of books kind of diminish when you lose the finer details and the memory of each scene, but I always look back on the Sisters Brothers very fondly.
The plot is odd because it feels like it's building and then it lets you down, but as I agree, Will. The strengths are in the dialogue and the relationships, and to me it reads kind of like an anti-Western, where it's in the world of a Western, but all of the elements are kind of moving away from that traditional Westernisms, really, of writing, of storytelling. The same story beats that you'll see in a John Wayne film to a Louis L'Amour flick, anything like that. Patrick DeWitt's The Sisters Brothers is incredibly unique from the dialogue, the relationships, the characters, and more importantly, the plot as well.
Yeah, and
it's a great read.
Ed, 5.5 years ago, you started reading again.
Yeah,
that is how old I will be in a year.
You'll be 5.5.
Not quite, but you are 23 and a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so it's like me starting not reading until next year. Isn't that crazy?
Are you telling it from my age, Will?
Sorry. Yeah, you can work it out from the clues.
You shouldn't ask people.
There, a clue, big milestone happening next year.
Yeah, it's a landstone.
Landstone.
It might be a landslide.
Next art is For Whom the Bell Tolls by Ernest Hemingway, an author who has a lot of controversy circulating around him. So when I picked up For Whom the Bell Tolls, I had a very surprising experience in terms that it didn't really align with what I've heard about him. He must have been very different in terms of what he sat down to write to how he acted in his own time. And I'm glad that Ed also loves this. I love the bit on the back. It says, "The world is a fine place and worth the fighting for, and I hate very much to leave it." And that really contains kind of philosophical but kind of streamlined approach and prose to this book. It is very philosophical, but not in a way that is kind of ornamental or purple prose. It's not over the top. It's very accessible. Ernest Hemingway set out with the intention that people understand what you mean. I think he had a saying that anyone can write a sentence that only they understand. The hard part is conveying something everyone can relate to and everyone can understand.
The ending must have been a right old shocker for people reading it in the context of, what was it, the 1930s?
Yeah, I think it might have been 1940 it was published.
Absolutely incredible. The ending is, even now, unlike anything I've ever read before. It's incredible. But yeah, it's a great story about how Robert Jordan was before he wrote The Wheel of Time.
Yes, this is about Robert Jordan and not the author of The Wheel of Time. It's about Robert Jordan, a man who volunteers for the Spanish Civil War, and he is engaging in guerrilla warfare, and he is put with a group of the Spanish who are trying to fight on the side that he's volunteered for against Franco. And so he comes to know the Spaniards, and he has this developing relationship. Some of it comes into conflict, some he has a growing respect for. And I found very interesting knowing that Ernest Hemingway was sexist at times. I think I've lost a lot of the details from when I learned about him, but I think he didn't treat his wives very well.
No.
The female characters in here are treated with a lot more respect. There is a kind of typical romance that you've got in many ways, but there's another character who is kind of a leading figure of the guerrilla warfare group, and she tells her own personal story, and there's this great kind of equal respect that she has for Robert Jordan and Robert Jordan has for her, which came as a very big surprise to me. And the way that story is told and these growing relationships goes against the romanticism that is often affiliated with this time period as well. And so, surprised me in many, many ways, and it's a book we both love.
It's a classic that feels like a classic, but it feels like a modern classic at that. It's very, very readable. Now, on to probably the greatest military historical fiction book ever written. It is Gates of Fire by Stephen Pressfield. Now, Papa Gwyn put us both onto this, and as soon as I read page 1, I knew this was a masterpiece. It's the story of Thermopylae, the Greek wars against the Persian Empire, and this book is incredibly unique in the way that it's written, in the style of it as well. It does feel like it's written very much with kind of a modern audience in mind, where it, how it focuses on brotherhood and camaraderie, but it is also, the style of it is very much inspired by original texts, from the ancient Greek period, from the classical period. It is so immersive, probably one of the most immersive books I've ever read. It's so intriguing, like I'm always wanting to turn the page, always wanting to find out what happens next, and the characters are delivered so incredibly. Some are set up to be like villains, some are set up to be heroes, and sometimes that crumbles underneath them. They are always morphing. They're kind of like a shadow. It's always changing, isn't it?
Yeah.
These characters, and that's why I absolutely love.
Yeah, I always find it a bit difficult with historical fiction. I choose a period and era that I'm going to pick a book up from because I want to learn about that period. But then I don't want it to be a history lesson because then I will just pick up some non-fiction. And so it's a very fine line that the author has to strike, really, to craft a great piece of immersion that kind of makes you feel like you are being thrown back in time, in this case to a land of antiquity. But then also investing you in the characters and not giving you info dumps that detract you from the story. And Stephen Pressfield, for me, just crafts the best balance. And the best balance is one that makes me know a bit about the historical period, but fall more in love with the characters and makes me want to read non-fiction after it. Yeah. That's when you know an author of historical fiction has done a fantastic job. And Stephen Pressfield, this story is about the characters. It's a chronicler's tale. It's a framing narrative of someone telling the story of their past. And of course, everyone is very kind of intrigued by the kind of mystical Spartans and these incredible warriors. And so it's very interesting that our main character isn't a Spartan, but they become invested in the story of Thermopylae and they end on the side of the Spartans for reasons which really add another layer of a mystery. It's like an onion. There's so many layers. That means that even though we know it's building towards Thermopylae and this great epic battle that has kind of echoed through millennia, but we are kind of presented with a mystery of how we get there. And so it's very, very magnetic. It's got incredible characters, fast-paced, very moving, and some philosophical questions which are excellent, especially circulating themes around camaraderie and about attaching yourself to an idea greater than yourself.
It all builds up to the final battle, the final kind of confrontation at Thermopylae, and that whole section, the segment, delivers tenfold. It is probably the best battle I've ever read.
And also, turn it sideways, Ed. This is one of the the thinner books that we're recommending today, so please do pick it up. Next up for me, well, it's both of us, but I'm the one who has the pleasure of holding this book, is We Are the Dead by Mike Shackle. This is book one of The Last War, and this trilogy is basically taking the premise of what if the bad guys won? What if Sauron took over the Shire? What would happen next? The poor hobbits. Luckily, Samwise is not in any danger here. It's a very unique world, and we are thrown into a city that has recently been taken over, and there's three main groups, really. There's kind of the old military trying to fight back against the new regime. There's people of this city who weren't part of the military, but they're again trying to fight against the new regime. And then there are people just trying to survive. And all three of those groups, as well as some figures from kind of the imposing force that we see, all of these different groups interact and are somehow suctioned into each other's stories. And it is really a cobweb of tales that are weaved together. Some are forced into actions that they'd rather just kind of leave aside and try and just survive day to day, but through actions which are mostly bad for them, they have to play a big role in what is to come in a brewing conflict. I love Mike Shackle's creativity. He has a villain here who basically he thought, what is the greatest gift humanity could have? And that is someone with the power to heal others. And then he thinks, how could you make that villainous? And it's someone who basically tortures people for information and then heals them so he can torture them again. And that sort of creativity, in a way that is very dark, makes this feel very brutal. But opposing that is some of the characters really are good people. It's not just grimdark. They're good people with good hearts, just wanting to leave a bit of good in the world and look after their family. And so the darkness isn't really oppressive because you've got that nice side to it as well. But it feels grim and brutal and bloody and very, very tense with an incredibly fast pace.
There's an interesting discourse on terrorism and freedom fighters, as well as, can humans be innocent? And Michael Shackle again has struck a perfect balance of plot, of pacing, of character work, and when to throw in a few explosions. Yeah,
and when people say to me, what do you think the most underrated fantasy series is, this is always my go-to.
Yeah. To some more historical fiction that we both love. This is Lancelot by Giles Christian. I would say that we're both Giles Christian fanboys, as well as Philip Stevens, the audio narrator of Lancelot and all of Giles Christian's books, actually.
So I've read 10 books and a novella by Giles Christian.
Nice. I think I've only not read the contemporary thriller, so I've read 9 and a novella.
Yeah.
He's an amazing writer, paints such a beautiful picture, and he's someone that if I was going to, if I wanted to study writing, I wanted to kind of look at how to actually form a sentence. Giles Christian just does it so well, where it actually feels like satisfying to read. It feels exciting to read, to even read it out loud, to read phrases again and again. There's so much meaning there. A lot of time and care, I think, he puts into his writing, unless he just does it naturally by accident, in which case he's a total git, because what a lucky man. But Lancelot is the beginning of the Arthurian trilogy. When we first read it, we just thought it's just a plain standalone, which I believe it was supposed to be, but it's kind of morphed in Giles's vision. But as it states on the tin, it is the story of Lancelot. Now we have the Arthurian legend here at play. This is in the Dark Ages, when Arthur was supposedly around, but not according to David Mitchell, unfortunately. But Lancelot is such, again, an immersive read, where everything from the prose to the details to the characters, it just fits with the world that Giles has created. The crescendos that Giles builds up to are done so well, and some of them are taken from Arthurian retellings and the legends, and some of them are invented for the purpose of storytelling, but they build up so well, and then they're done so satisfyingly.
Yeah, he doesn't just operate at the whim of Arthurian legend. He brings in the tales that are relevant to make the best story possible, but he doesn't shove everything in there. Also, on the topic of his prose, I'd say it is perfect for an Arthurian retelling, because it is one of the legends that is just full of mysticism, but also heroism and tragedy, and there's always this kind of nostalgic, melancholic tone that fits so perfectly with the tale of Arthur, because you know part of what is coming. And there are ways to subvert this and the different decisions that are taken to change your expectations as the reader, but that tone is really imbued so well in Giles Christian's prose.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, Will, the last one.
Last one
banger.
Is one of drive, or is one of anger, and is one of vengeance. It is
and
the
a bit of rage.
And a bit of rage. It is The Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter, book 1 of The Burning. We follow a character of Tau, who he is living in a society which is very hierarchical, and that is kind of decided for you by your birthright, and that status really is very inflexible and cannot change much. But something happens in his personal life which sets him on a path of vengeance, and this is a story which has just got so much drive. But that doesn't just mean fast-paced. That means that even in the slower emotional beats, you have got this building up of tension, and it just feels like a force of nature. If any book is going to be a whirlwind, it is The Rage of Dragons. I see some people have a bit of a problem with Tau being like, come on, you got to go chill out, because people are caught in collateral in your pursuit of vengeance. But if you were in his situation, I think I do the same. I would definitely die within 30 pages.
That's terrifying.
But you know what? You would seek vengeance in that situation, wouldn't you?
I would hope so.
And The Rage of Dragons is just really fantastically told. Very stripped back prose, one that really immerses you in the characters and in the action. And it has got moments of flair as well, which I think are fantastic, especially in the creativity in what subverts a few tropes. In subverting how someone can be excellent at something, and these things which often with characters and their kind of farmer boy upbringings doesn't really make sense. There are ways that it is put into reality which feel fantastic in the fantastical, and it's just incredible.
It's a great read, and I feel like Tau's someone who you kind of grow to love. You don't instantly like him, I would say. Maybe Evan Winter wanted not to like him straight away, but he has the motivations, but he hasn't got the character behind him. But it's not until later on the book, for me, that I really fell in love with him as a character. The training montages are—it's just Rocky meets the Gladiator, meets Gladiator, isn't it? And the Gladiator sequences are some of my favourite things. They're some of my favourite things to read anyway. Jay Kristoff, I just recently read. What's it called? I've completely forgotten the name.
God's Grave,
thank you. That was incredible. The whole Gladiator sequence was just just blew out of the water. But it is incredible, and I would definitely recommend picking up Evan Winter's The Rage of Dragons if you're a big fan of fantasy.
And it's definitely one for beginner fantasy. We were talking to your friend Matembi, weren't we? And he was saying how there's a few books, one of the many Rage of Dragons, that he just absolutely adores. And I think Rage of Dragons, was it one of the earlier books that he read?
Yes, yeah, definitely. One of the early ones of fantasy.
But yeah, this is a book of force, a book of drive, and it's the last one we're talking about today. They are 10 books that both us brothers love. Isn't it nice to see us getting
so
on?
Lovely that we both
we'll be over
agree.
next video when we talk about 10 books. Now,
we disagree on. We should do that, though.
No, we just like to be positive, Ed. We don't want to argue. We just do that off screen. Anyway, these are 10 books that we both love. We really hope that you pick them up. Some are very complex and we wouldn't recommend to everyone. Others are books that I would just try to push in everybody's corner. Yeah. And we try not to just do the ones we talk about every video, like the Glorious Exploits of the World, like the Blade itself, and of course, because we're a bit biased, Papa Gwyn's works. We've talked about 10 that are slightly different and still managed to fit in the ones we love as well.
That's true.
So there we go. That is all from us today. Anything else you got to add, Ed?
Stay safe from the Brothers Gwyn.
The Brothers Gwyn.
Truth and courage.
Truth and courage.
Thank you to all of our bindery members.
Thank you to the Pit Fighters, the First Swords, and all of the Bright Stars.
Truth and courage.